The Arizona desert holds secrets that even the scorching sun cannot reveal. Sarah Winters stumbles across the barren landscape, her dress torn, her water gone. 3 days since the attack that left her widowed. 2 hours since the last drop touched her parched lips. Ahead lies the Forbidden Canyon, home to the towering Apache they call Shadow Walker. Most folks in Copper Springs cross themselves at the mention of his name. They say he was cursed by his own people, that his touch brings death. As her knees hit the dust at the canyon's edge, she sees him, taller than any man she's ever known, face carved from stone and time. "Please," she whispers, will this feared outcast become her unlikely savior? Or is he just another danger in a land that shows no mercy? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The cool darkness was the first thing Sarah noticed. After days beneath the merciless Arizona sun, the absence of heat felt like a blessing from heaven itself. She blinked slowly, her cracked lips parting as she tried to form words that wouldn't come. Stone walls surrounded her, the filtered light suggesting she was deep within the canyon. Not dead, then. At least not yet. A movement in the shadows startled her. He was there, the giant, sitting cross-legged on the packed earth floor, perfectly still save for his hands, which worked methodically with something she couldn't make out. He didn't look up. "Water," she managed, the words scraping her throat like sandpaper. Without speaking, he reached for a clay vessel and moved toward her. Sarah flinched involuntarily. Up close, he seemed even larger, his shoulders blocking what little light filtered into the cave dwelling. His face remained impassive as he held the water to her lips. "Small sips," he said, his voice deep and rusty as though rarely used. "Or you'll sicken." Sarah obeyed, fighting the urge to gulp the precious liquid. As her mind cleared, memory returned, Thomas's blood seeping into the parched earth of their homestead. The flames consuming everything they'd built, Walsh's men laughing as she fled into the night. Her hand went instinctively to her wedding ring, the simple gold band that had symbolized safety, protection, dreams of a future. "All gone now." "Your husband?" the Apache asked, noticing her gesture. "Dead?" Sarah replied, the word hanging between them like smoke. 3 days ago." He nodded once, returning to his place across the room. Walsh's men. It wasn't a question. Sarah studied him properly now, the silver threaded through his long black hair, the deep lines etched around his eyes, the powerful hands that worked with surprising delicacy on what she now saw was some kind of leather pouch. "You know Walsh?" she asked. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped him. "Everyone knows Walsh. Clayton Walsh, the cattle baron who controlled half the county, whose men took what they wanted, who had decided her husband's small homestead was worth killing for." Sarah had heard the name Shadow Walker whispered in Copper Springs with fear and superstition, but Walsh was spoken of with a different kind of fear. The real kind. "I can leave when I'm stronger," she said, though the thought of returning to the desert made her stomach clench. "Where would you go?" Again, not really a question. Sarah twisted the ring on her finger. 6 months married to Thomas Winters, a kind man with dreams bigger than his capabilities. They'd come west with little more than hope, claiming land that no one seemed to want. Until the drought came, until water became more precious than gold, until Walsh decided their small spring-fed homestead should be his. "I don't know," she admitted. The Apache returned to his work, and silence fell between them. Sarah took the opportunity to observe her surroundings. The cave dwelling was surprisingly orderly. Pelts and woven blankets created separate spaces. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling. Books, actual books, were stacked neatly along one wall. Not what she'd expected from the savage the townspeople feared. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked. He didn't answer immediately, his dark eyes remaining fixed on his work. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, as if each one cost him something. "These canyon walls have seen enough death." Sarah's gaze drifted to her torn dress, the dirt and blood that covered her arms. She'd run until her feet bled. Hidden during the scorching days, pushed on during the frigid nights, all to reach the one place Walsh's men wouldn't follow. The home of Shadow Walker, the cursed Apache giant that even hardened killers feared to approach. "Thank you," she whispered. He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "Don't thank me yet, woman. You're not safe. Not even here." Before dawn, Maka left the cave. Sarah heard him rise, his movements nearly silent despite his size. She feigned sleep, watching through half-closed lids as he gathered a small leather pouch from a niche in the wall. The medicine pouch was worn smooth with age, adorned with faded beadwork and a single eagle feather. Once alone, Sarah tried to stand. Her legs trembled beneath her, still weak from her ordeal. Using the wall for support, she made her way to the cave entrance, determined to understand her surroundings. The sight stole what little breath she had. The canyon spread before her like a painting, red stone walls catching the first light, the drop below dizzying. A narrow path wound down from the cave, barely visible in the growing light. No wonder Walsh's men hadn't followed her here. One misstep would mean certain death. Movement below caught her eye. Maka stood on an outcropping, facing the rising sun. The medicine pouch hung from his hands as he raised them skyward. His lips moved in silent prayer or ritual, his powerful frame suddenly seeming vulnerable against the vastness of the canyon. Sarah retreated, feeling like an intruder. Whatever demons or gods this man communed with were not for her to witness. By the time he returned, she had managed to find her way back to the sleeping mat. He carried fresh water and what looked like desert fruits. "You walked," he observed, setting down his gatherings. "I needed to see where I was." He nodded, offering her a piece of prickly pear fruit, cleaned of thorns. "Eat, it will help." She accepted it gratefully. "The people in town, they say you're cursed." His face remained impassive, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "People say many things. They say your own tribe cast you out." "They did. Why?" Maka didn't answer immediately. He took the medicine pouch from around his neck, his fingers tracing the beadwork with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance. "I was a healer," he finally said. "Among my people, such gifts come with responsibility." "What happened?" "Sickness came. White man's disease. I could not stop it." His voice remained steady, but Sarah saw how his knuckles whitened around the pouch. "My wife, my son, 38 others. All dead." Sarah's chest tightened. "They blamed you." "Some did. Others feared the spirits had abandoned me." He shrugged, a barely perceptible movement of his massive shoulders. "So I left." "You chose exile?" "I chose peace." He tucked the medicine pouch away. "The canyon offers that, at least." "Until I arrived," Sarah thought but didn't say. "I'll leave tomorrow," she offered, though the thought of facing the desert again filled her with dread. Walsh's men are still searching. Maka moved to the cave entrance, gazing outward. "They came to the canyon's edge yesterday." Fear crawled up Sarah's spine. "Did they see you?" "No, but they will return." "Then I should go. I've brought enough trouble to your door." Maka turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "There is no door, woman. And trouble was already here." The bluntness of his words surprised a laugh from her. It sounded strange to her own ears, rusty from disuse. When was the last time she had laughed? Before Thomas died, certainly. Perhaps even before that. Maka looked startled at the sound, then his expression closed again. He busied himself with organizing the items he'd gathered. "Why did you become a healer?" Sarah asked, seeking to understand this contradictory man. His hands stilled. "It was not a choice. The gift comes or it does not. Like a curse." His dark eyes met hers. "Sometimes there is little difference." The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Sarah thought of Thomas, of his dreams that had led them west, of the love that had felt like salvation until it had led to his death. "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes there isn't." By the third day, Sarah could move without pain. She sat at the mouth of the cave, watching dust devils dance across the distant plains. Somewhere out there lay the charred remains of her homestead, the shallow grave she dug for Thomas before fleeing. This belonged to your husband. Maka's voice startled her from her thoughts. He held a torn piece of paper, part of a map Thomas had kept in his breast pocket. Sarah had forgotten she'd taken it from his body before burying him. Yes, she said, accepting it with careful fingers. Thomas was meticulous about marking boundaries. The map showed their homestead and the surrounding territories. Thomas had marked in red the expanding borders of Walsh's claims. With each passing month of drought, those red lines had crept closer to their land. This is why they came, Sarah explained, pointing to a small blue mark near their property line. Our spring. Small, but reliable even in drought. Maka studied the map. Water is life in this territory. Sheriff Mills said the law was on our side. Bitterness seeped into her voice. Fat lot of good that did when Walsh's men rode in. Mills is a good man, but he is one man. Maka's face remained impassive. And Walsh has many guns. Sheriff Everett Mills had been Thomas's friend, had encouraged them to file proper claims on the land. He'd also been the one to warn them when Walsh started showing interest in their water rights. They came at night, Sarah said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Thomas heard them first. Told me to hide in the root cellar. I heard the shots. 3 of them. Her fingers trembled on the map. When I came out, the house was burning. He was still alive, but there was so much blood. Maka remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. He told me to run, to find Sheriff Mills. She gave a hollow laugh. Instead, I ran here, to the one place everyone in Copper Springs avoids. Why? Because I knew Walsh's men wouldn't follow. She met his gaze steadily. They fear you more than they fear the law. Something like amusement flickered in Maka's dark eyes. They fear what they do not understand. And what is there to understand about you, Shadow Walker? That is not my name. He turned away, moving back into the shadows of the cave. Sarah followed. What should I call you, then? He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Maka. What does it mean? Earth. It means earth. Sarah tested the name silently. Suited him, solid, unchanging, elemental. Walsh will not stop looking for you, Maka said, changing the subject. He does not leave witnesses. I know. Sarah folded the map carefully. I can't stay here forever. No, you cannot. The bluntness of his response stung, though she knew it was only truth. This temporary refuge couldn't last. There's a stage to Santa Fe next week, she said. If I could reach it. Walsh watches the stage. Maka interrupted. He has men in town. Eyes everywhere. Then what do you suggest? Frustration sharpened her tone. Wait, gather strength. When the time is right, I will show you a path through the canyon. It leads west, away from Walsh's territory. It was the most he'd spoken at once, and Sarah found herself studying him with new interest. Why would you help me? Maka met her gaze, his expression unreadable. I have no answer that would satisfy you. Try anyway. He looked away back toward the mouth of the cave and the vastness beyond. This canyon has been a place of endings for me. Perhaps it can be a beginning for you. Sarah felt tears threaten, the first since Thomas died. She blinked them back, refusing to show such weakness. I appreciate your help, she said formally. But I've learned that in this world, everyone wants something in return. Maka's face hardened. Then you have learned the wrong lesson, woman. He rose to his full height, towering over her. You have no protection, and I have no love. Remember that, and we will manage well enough until you can leave. With those words, he stepped out into the fading light, leaving Sarah alone with the torn map and her uncertain future. The morning brought a change in the air, not cooler, but different. Sarah sensed it before opening her eyes. Maka was already gone from his sleeping place, but something new sat beside her pallet. A roughly carved wooden cup, still smelling of fresh cedar. She turned it in her hands, noting the care in its making. Peace offering, perhaps. Outside, She found Maka perched on a high outcropping, a brass telescope extended toward the plains below. Another surprise. She hadn't expected such a tool in his possession. "They're coming back," he said without turning. I still fixed to the telescope. "For riders. Walsh's men." Sarah's heart quickened. "How long?" "Midday, perhaps." He collapsed the telescope, finally looking at her. "They search in a pattern now. More careful than before. They know I'm alive." The reality of her situation returned with crushing weight. Maka nodded once. "Yes. I should leave. Draw them away from here." His expression darkened. "Foolish. You would not last an hour. And if they find me here? What happens to you?" Something like surprise flickered across his face, quickly masked. "They will not find you." He led her deeper into the canyon, through passages so narrow they had to turn sideways to pass. The route twisted and doubled back, impossible to follow without intimate knowledge of the terrain. Finally, they emerged into a hidden grotto, a small space with a natural spring bubbling from rock. "If they come, you wait here," Maka instructed. "No fire, no movement until I return. And if you don't return?" He pointed to a barely visible crack in the far wall. "That leads to the western path. Follow it only in desperation. It is treacherous." Sarah nodded, committing the route to memory. "Thank you for the cup." Maka looked momentarily confused, then dismissive. "You needed one. The other was cracked." Practical explanation, nothing more. Yet Sarah wasn't convinced. They returned to his dwelling in silence. Inside, Sarah noticed what she'd overlooked before: a small shelf of books, worn but carefully maintained. "You read?" She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Maka stiffened. "Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. The missionaries taught me, before I returned to my people." He ran a finger along the spines. Shakespeare, Milton, a Bible, several scientific texts. "Words remain when all else is gone." Sarah approached the shelf. "May I?" He nodded once. She selected a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets, opening to a random page. The margins contained neat annotations in a strong hand. "These are yours," she realized, studying the thoughtful notes. "Words need company sometimes." He took the book gently, replacing it on the shelf. Like people. The admission hung in the air between them. Sarah felt something shift, a small door opening in the wall between them. "I could cook," she offered suddenly. "While we wait. I noticed your stores." Maka considered her for a long moment. "You feel you must earn your place?" "I won't be charity. There is no charity in the desert. Only survival." He gestured to his cooking area. "But yes, you may cook." As Sarah organized the simple ingredients, Maka returned to the cave entrance with his telescope. The familiar motions of cooking settled her mind, gave purpose to her anxious hands. By mid-afternoon, the aroma of stew filled the cave. Maka returned, his expression grim. "They've reached the canyon mouth," he reported. "2 men remain with horses. 2 continue on foot." Sarah's hands stilled over the cooking pot. "They're coming here?" "They search the lower paths." He moved to a hidden recess in the wall, withdrawing a knife and what looked like an old army revolver. "They will not find the way up." "You seem very certain." Maka's lips thinned. "I have lived here 15 summers. None have found this place who I did not wish to find it. Until me." His dark eyes met hers. "Yes, until you." The implication was clear. Her arrival had changed something fundamental, brought danger to his sanctuary. Yet he was preparing to defend it, to defend her, rather than cast her out. "Why?" she asked simply. Maka checked the revolver's chambers, his movements precise. "Some debts cannot be measured or repaid." He tucked the weapon into his waistband. "Stay inside, no matter what you hear." Sarah waited, each minute stretching like hours. Through the cave entrance, the sun's position shifted, shadows lengthening across the canyon. She fingered Thomas's pocket watch, the only possession she'd salvaged besides her wedding ring. The gold case was dented now, the glass cracked, but it still kept time. For hours had passed since Maka left. Voices echoed from somewhere below, men's voices, unfamiliar and harsh. Sarah retreated deeper into the cave, heart hammering. Then silence returned, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. When Maka finally appeared in the entrance, the sky behind him had turned amber with approaching sunset. His expression revealed nothing, but Sarah noted how he favored his right side. "They've gone," he said simply. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." Sarah approached anyway, gesturing to the dark stains spreading on his shirt. "That's not nothing." After a moment's hesitation, Maka allowed her to examine the wound, a deep graze along his ribs. "One of them had a rifle," he explained as she cleaned the injury with water and strips torn from her petticoat. "He was careless." The careful choice of words told Sarah more than he intended. "Did you kill him?" "No." Maka winced as she applied pressure to the wound. "But he will not return to Walsh unmarked." "Thank you," she said softly, "for protecting me." "I protected my home," he corrected, though without harshness. As night fell, they shared the stew Sarah had prepared. The domesticity of the scene struck her as strangely incongruous, two wounded souls breaking bread in a cave while killers searched below. "You said Walsh's men would not follow me here," Sarah ventured. "Yet they did." Maka stared into the small fire. "Walsh went to town yesterday. Sheriff Mills told me." "Sheriff Mills came here?" "To the canyon edge. We have an understanding." Sarah tried to imagine the aging lawman and this Apache recluse as allies. "What did he say?" "Walsh has offered $500 for information about you." Maka's voice remained even. "He claims you stole from him before fleeing." Anger flashed through Sarah. "Stole? My husband's blood is on his hands. Mills knows this, but he is one man with a tin star. Walsh owns half the county and most of the men in it." Sarah's fingers found Thomas's watch again. "So I'm trapped. If I leave, I'm hunted. If I stay..." She met Maka's gaze across the fire. "I endanger you. The canyon has protected me for 15 years. It will continue to do so. Why was the sheriff looking for you specifically?" Maka was silent for a long moment. "There are few secrets in small places. Mills knew I sometimes help those who need to disappear." The revelation surprised her. "You've harbored others?" "2 families. A man Walsh accused of rustling. A woman running from her husband." His eyes reflected the firelight. "The canyon leads to places Walsh's men cannot follow. Yet you stay. This is my home." The simple declaration contained volumes. Sarah thought of her own lost home, the dreams she and Thomas had poured into that small patch of dusty earth. "I had a home once," she said softly. "Before this." She opened Thomas's watch, revealing the small photograph inside Sarah and Thomas on their wedding day. Her smile wide and hopeful, his face serious but proud. Maka studied the image. He was young, 26, full of plans. Sarah closed the watch with a soft click. He wanted to build something that would last. "And you?" The question caught her off guard. What had she wanted? She'd followed Thomas West with little thought beyond being a good wife. "I wanted," she faltered. "I'm not sure I knew even then." Silence fell between them, comfortable rather than strained. Outside, night creatures began their chorus. "I had a wife," Maka said suddenly. "Kimmy, and a son, a Hote. 7 summers when the sickness came." Sarah remained still, afraid any movement might stop his words. "I tried every medicine, every prayer. For 3 days, they burned with fever." His voice remained steady, but his hands had stilled. "On the 4th day they were gone, 38 others with them." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "Some said I had lost favor with the spirits, that my medicine had turned bad." The firelight carved deep shadows across his face. "Perhaps they were right. Is that why you left your people?" "I left because there was nothing to stay for." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "You understand this." It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded slowly, recognizing the same hollowness that had driven her to the canyon's edge. "What will you do now?" Maka asked. Sarah considered the question, weighing her limited options. "I don't know, but I can't keep running forever." "No," he agreed. "No one can." A routine developed in the days that followed. Sarah woke at dawn, prepared a simple breakfast, then helped Maka tend his small garden of drought-resistant plants. Afternoons were spent in the relative cool of the cave, where Sarah mended her tattered clothing and Maka worked with his hands. It was during one such afternoon that Sarah discovered his carvings. A small wooden figure, half-finished, sat amid a collection of finely crafted tools, knives of various sizes, small gouges, and what looked like dental instruments. "Did you make these?" she asked, gesturing to the tools. Maka nodded without looking up from his work. "Some. Others I traded for. And this." She picked up the carving, a bird taking flight, its details emerging from the wood grain. "A hawk." He set down his current project and took the carving from her, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "The canyon has a family that returns each spring." The craftsmanship was exquisite, each feather distinct, the sense of movement captured in static wood. "It's beautiful." Something softened in his expression. "Beauty is necessary, even here." Sarah studied the other completed carvings arranged on a small shelf. Animals, plants, a woman's face so detailed it seemed about to speak. "You could sell these in town. They'd fetch a good price." "I do not go to town." "Because they fear you?" "Because I fear them." The admission seemed to surprise even him. He returned to his work, the conversation clearly over. But the next day he offered her a piece of wood and a small knife. "If you wish to learn." Sarah accepted both with care. "I've never carved anything." "Start simple. The wood will tell you what it wants to be." She laughed. "Does it speak to you, then?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. In its way. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the scrape of blade against wood and the distant canyon winds. Sarah's first attempts were clumsy, her cuts too deep or angled wrong. Maka occasionally reached over to adjust her grip or demonstrate a technique, his large hands surprisingly gentle. On the fifth day, as they worked outside to catch the morning light, movement on the canyon rim caught Sarah's attention. "Someone's watching," she whispered, hand freezing on her carving. Maka didn't look up. "Walsh's scout. He comes every other day." "You knew and didn't tell me?" Anger flared in her chest. "He cannot see. You hear? We are in shadow." "That's not the point." Sarah set down her carving tools. "I should know when I'm being hunted." Maka finally met her gaze. "You are always being hunted. Knowing the moment changes nothing." "It changes everything," she insisted. "Knowledge is protection. Sometimes knowledge is fear." He returned to his carving. "And fear makes hands shake, makes mistakes." Sarah watched the distant figure pace along the rim, then disappear. "What if he finds a way down? Then we will know he is smarter than the others." Maka set down his tools and rose. "Come, I will show you something." He led her to a narrow chimney in the rock, barely visible unless you knew where to look. "This leads to the top. If danger comes from below, we go up. And if it comes from above, then we go down." He pointed to another hidden passage. "Always have two paths." The practicality of his planning calmed her somewhat. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything." His gaze traveled to the distant horizon, where dust rose from moving riders. "Walsh grows impatient. Soon he will send more men. Then I should leave." "Not yet." Maka's response was immediate. "The moon is wrong." "The moon." 2 weeks. When the moon is new, the darkness will cover your trail. 2 more weeks in the canyon. 2 more weeks of carving wood in the morning light, of learning the hidden paths, of sharing meals in silence that grew more comfortable by the day. 2 more weeks with Maka. "Teach me to defend myself," Sarah said suddenly. "If I'm to survive out there, I need to know how." Maka studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Tomorrow. We begin tomorrow." That night, as they sat by the small fire, Sarah noticed Maka carving something new, a small figure that looked remarkably like her, head bent in concentration over her own carving. The sight stirred something in her chest, something she wasn't ready to name. Sheriff Mills came as the sun was setting, his approach announced by the soft whinny of his horse from the narrow trail below. Maka tensed at the sound, motioning for Sarah to retreat deeper into the cave. "It's Mills," he said, "but stay hidden until I'm certain he's alone." Sarah nodded, watching as Maka moved with surprising stealth down the path. Minutes later, he returned with the sheriff, a weathered man with a silver mustache and tired eyes. "Mrs. Winters." Mills removed his hat, revealing hair as gray as his mustache. "Thank the Lord you're alive, Sheriff." Sarah stepped forward, relief washing over her. Here was someone from her old life, someone who had known Thomas. Mills glanced at Maka, who gave a slight nod and withdrew to give them privacy. "I've been searching for you since." Mills trailed off, discomfort evident in his stance. "Since Walsh's men murdered my husband and burned our home." Sarah finished for him, her voice steadier than she expected. Mills winced. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry I couldn't protect Thomas. He was a good man." "What brings you here, Sheriff?" "Surely not just to offer condolences." Mills reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded bundle of letters tied with string. "These came for you. Your sister in San Francisco has been writing since before everything happened. The postmaster's been holding them." Sarah accepted the letters with trembling hands. Emma's familiar handwriting swam before her eyes, 5 letters spanning months, the last postmarked just 2 weeks ago. She doesn't know, Sarah realized, about Thomas, about any of it. "No, ma'am." Sarah clutched the letters tightly. Emma had always urged them to come to San Francisco instead of staking a claim in Arizona territory. "There's nothing for decent folk in that godforsaken desert," she'd written. Now her words seemed prophetic. "There's more," Mills said, his voice dropping. "Walsh went to the territorial judge, got himself appointed temporary custodian of your land until ownership can be properly established. He can't do that. He did. Claims your husband owed him money. Without Thomas to dispute it. It's a lie. We owed nothing to Walsh." Mills sighed heavily. "I know that, Mrs. Winters, but Walsh has the judge's ear. And his pocketbook. So he gets away with murder, takes our land. And I become the criminal." Bitterness coated each word. "I'm trying to build a case, find witnesses, but folks are scared." Mills replaced his hat. "You'd be wise to leave the territory. Your sister's invitation might be your best chance." Sarah looked down at the letters. A way out. A new beginning far from Walsh's reach. "I've asked Maka to guide you through the canyon when you're ready," Mills continued. "There's a settlement 3 days west. From there, you can catch the stage to California." "You trust him that much?" Sarah asked, glancing toward where Maka stood at the cave entrance, his broad silhouette stark against the evening sky. "With my life." Mills's voice held absolute certainty. "Has for years." The revelation added another layer to the enigma of Maka. What history bound these two men, an aging lawman and an exiled Apache healer? "Thank you, Sheriff." Sarah tucked the letters into her pocket. "For everything." Mills nodded, then hesitated. "One more thing. Walsh has men watching the canyon. They've hired a tracker, half-Apache fellow named Diaz. He's good. Real good." Sarah's stomach clenched. "Better than Maka?" "No one's better than Maka in these canyons." Mills managed a grim smile. "But Diaz is persistent, and Walsh is paying him well." After the sheriff departed, Sarah opened Emma's letters by firelight. Her sister's words painted a life so removed from Sarah's current reality, tales of San Francisco society, a new home with room for guests, gentle inquiries about when Sarah and Thomas might visit. The final letter held an explicit invitation. "Come stay with us, dear Sarah. You and Thomas would thrive here. Robert's business is doing splendidly, and we have connections that could help Thomas establish himself properly. A lifeline, a future waiting beyond the canyon walls." Maka returned, moving silently despite his size. He glanced at the letters but asked no questions. My sister, Sarah explained anyway. In San Francisco. She wants me to come live with them. Maka nodded once. A good place to disappear. Yes. Sarah folded the letters carefully. I suppose it is. For the first time since arriving at the canyon, Sarah had a clear path forward. Yet instead of relief, she felt strangely hollow. Your garden could be larger, Sarah observed the next morning as they tended the small plot of vegetables tucked against a protected canyon wall. This soil is better than it looks. Maka glanced up from the beans he was harvesting. One man needs little, but you could grow more. Trade with Mills, perhaps. Sarah ran her fingers through the dark soil. With the right seeds, even in drought. You know plants. There was genuine curiosity in his voice. My father was a farmer in Kansas before the fever took him. I grew up with dirt under my nails. She smiled at the memory. Mother said I could make anything grow. The next day, Maka disappeared before dawn. When he returned mid-morning, he carried a small leather pouch. For you, he said, handing it to Sarah. Inside were seeds, dozens of varieties. Some she recognized, others unfamiliar. Where did you get these? Mills. Maka indicated a flat area near his existing garden. There. The morning sun is good, but the afternoon shade protects from the worst heat. They worked side by side, clearing rocks, preparing soil. Sarah found herself explaining as she worked which plants should grow together, how deep to plant each seed, how to conserve water through careful placement. Maka listened intently, his hands following her instructions with precision. Your husband was a farmer too? Thomas. Sarah shook her head. He worked for the railroad back east, dreamed of land, but knew little about working it. She paused, realizing the truth of her words. I tried to teach him what my father taught me, but the land is not forgiving of mistakes, Maka finished. No, it isn't. She planted a drought-resistant corn seed with careful fingers. The spring on our property was small, but I knew how to make it work, how to stretch every drop. That is why Walsh wanted your land. Not just for the water, but for your knowledge. The observation startled her. She hadn't considered that her skills might have value beyond her own survival. As days passed, their work expanded. Sarah showed Maka how to create natural barriers against pests, how to use companion planting to strengthen each crop. In turn, he shared knowledge of native plants, which desert herbs could be used for medicine, which wild seeds could be ground for flour. You call this one? Sarah asked, pointing to a spiky plant with tiny flowers. Setadi, Maka replied. It stops bleeding. Sarah attempted to repeat the word, mangling the pronunciation. Maka's mouth twitched, that almost smile she'd come to recognize. Try again, he encouraged. Say D-Day. She tried several more times, finally producing something close enough that Maka nodded approval. Good. Now this one. He indicated another plant. By sunset, Sarah had learned 5 Apache plant names, repeating each until Maka was satisfied with her pronunciation. As they walked back to the cave, she realized they had spent the entire day working together, talking more than they had in all previous days combined. That night, she wrote a letter to Emma. She explained Thomas's death in simple terms, avoiding details that would only cause her sister pain. She mentioned her plan to travel to San Francisco, though she gave no specifics about when she might arrive. What she didn't write was anything about Maka, or the canyon, or how for the first time since Thomas died, she had spent a day without the weight of grief pressing down on her chest. Maka watched her fold the letter. Mills will take it next time, he offered. Thank you. Sarah hesitated. In 2 weeks, when the moon is new. Yes. Would you teach me more words before then? For the plants, I mean. Something shifted in Maka's dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. If you wish. I do. Sarah tucked the letter away. Knowledge is protection. Remember? Later, as moonlight filtered into the cave, Sarah woke to the sound of Maka's voice, low, melodic, speaking words she didn't understand. A prayer, perhaps, or a song. She remained still, listening to the cadence rise and fall until sleep claimed her again. She dreamed of gardens spreading across the canyon floor, of green life emerging from red earth, of standing beside a tall figure whose shadow offered not darkness, but sheltered in the quiet hours before dawn. Sarah woke to find Makar's sleeping place empty. This wasn't unusual. He often rose early to check the canyon approaches. But something drew her deeper into the cave, toward a narrow crevice she hadn't explored. The sound reached her first, a low, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. Then came the smell of sage and sweetgrass. She hesitated at the entrance to a small chamber, knowing she was approaching something private. But curiosity pulled her forward. The chamber opened to the sky through a natural chimney, stars still visible in the fading night. Maka knelt in the center, his broad back to her, shoulders bare. Before him sat a small drum, its surface decorated with symbols she didn't recognize. As she watched, his hands moved across it in patterns that seemed both practiced and spontaneous. He wasn't simply beating the drum. He was speaking through it, his body swaying slightly with each rhythm. The sound filled the chamber, rising toward the stars, echoing against stone walls that had heard such prayers for generations before white men claimed this land. Sarah knew she should leave, that this moment wasn't meant for her eyes. As she stepped back, her foot dislodged a small stone. The drumming stopped. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I heard the sound and... you should not be here." Makara's voice was cold, colder than she'd heard since her first days in the canyon. "I didn't mean to intrude." Sarah remained in the doorway. "What is it?" "The drum." For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "It belonged to my father and his father before him. It speaks to those who have crossed over." "Your family?" Maka covered the drum with a piece of tanned hide. "All who have gone before. The ancestors." Sarah took a step closer. "Will you show me?" "No." The sharpness of his refusal startled her. "Some things are not for sharing, woman. You forget yourself." The rebuke stung more than she expected. After days of growing companionship, his withdrawal felt like physical pain. "I apologize," she said stiffly, retreating. "It won't happen again." She returned to the main cave, anger and embarrassment heating her cheeks. The easy harmony of recent days shattered. She busied herself with morning tasks, her movements jerky with suppressed emotion. When Maka finally emerged, he moved past her without speaking, the drum nowhere in sight. The day stretched before them, suddenly vast and empty without their usual exchange of words. By midday, the silence had become unbearable. "I truly am sorry," Sarah said as they worked separately in the garden. "I didn't understand the significance." Maka's hands stilled in the soil. "The drum is connection to what was lost, to who I was. The healer." "Yes." He didn't look at her. "When my family died, when my people turned away, I put aside many things. The drum remained. It is the only voice I have that reaches beyond this world." Sarah thought of Thomas's pocket watch, of her wedding ring, small talismans of a life now gone. "I understand treasuring what remains." "Do you?" Now he did look at her, his dark eyes searching. "Your grief is fresh, sharp-edged. Mine has had time to sink deep, to become part of the bone. Does it ever stop hurting?" The question emerged unbidden, vulnerable. Something softened in his face. "No, but you learn to carry it differently, as part of who you are, not something separate." The honesty of his answer loosened the knot in her chest. "Thank you for telling me truth instead of comfort." Maka nodded once, then returned to his work. But the brittle silence had broken. That evening, as they ate, Sarah noticed him watching her with an unreadable expression. "What is it?" she finally asked. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will show you the drum, not its song that remains mine alone, but its story, if you wish to know." The offer hung between them, more significant than the simple words suggested. "I would be honored," Sarah replied carefully. Later, as the fire burned low, she heard him speak softly in his own language. One phrase repeated almost like a question. When she finally drifted to sleep, the rhythm of the drum followed her into dreams, no longer a forbidden mystery, but a heartbeat connecting past to present, lost to survival. Sheriff Mills returned 3 days later, his expression grimmer than before. He handed Maka a folded paper without ceremony. "What is it?" Sarah asked, watching Maka's face darken as he read. Mills removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "Wanted poster. Walsh convinced Judge Hollister to issue it yesterday." Maka passed the paper to Sarah. Her own face stared back at her, a crude sketch, but recognizable enough. Below it, block letters declared, "Wanted, Sarah Winters, for theft of property and documents from Clayton Walsh. $500 reward." Theft. Sarah's hands trembled. What am I supposed to have stolen? Water rights documents, according to Walsh. Mills sighed heavily. He claims Thomas signed over your spring before he died, and you stole the papers when you fled. That's absurd. Sarah crumpled the poster. Thomas would never. It doesn't matter what's true, Maka said quietly. Only what Walsh can make others believe. Mills nodded. He's got men watching every settlement within 4 days' ride, showing that poster to anyone who'll look. So I can't leave. The reality settled over Sarah like a physical weight. Not even when the moon is new. Not that way, no? Mills glanced at Maka. But there are other paths. Maka's expression remained unreadable. The western route, through Diablo Canyon. Something passed between the two men, an unspoken concern. What's wrong with that route? Sarah asked. It's difficult, Mills answered carefully. Longer, less water. More than that, Maka added. Few know it. Few survive it. Sarah looked between them. But you know it? Maka nodded once. I know it. After Mills departed, Sarah found Maka standing at the cave entrance, staring toward the western horizon where Diablo Canyon presumably lay. How bad is it really? She asked. This other route. Bad enough. He turned to face her. 3 days without water at one stretch. Narrow passages where a wrong step means death. Apache burial grounds that my people avoid even in desperate times. But you've done it before. Once. His gaze returned to the horizon. Many years ago. With Sheriff Mills? Something like surprise flickered across Maka's face. Yes, when he was younger. Stronger. Why? Apaches from a different band had taken his wife. Maka's voice was matter-of-fact. The army would not help. Too few soldiers, too much territory to cover. So he came to you. Sarah understood now the bond between these unlikely allies. We found her. Brought her back. Maka's expression darkened. She lived 6 more months. The things they did to her. Her mind never healed. Sarah absorbed this revelation, seeing the aging sheriff in a new light. And you've been friends since. Not friends. Maka seemed to consider the word. We understand each other's debts. That night, Sarah's body betrayed her with chills and sweat. By morning, fever gripped her, turning the world hazy and distorted. She was vaguely aware of Maka's concerned face, of cool cloths on her forehead, of bitter-tasting teas pressed to her lips. Time lost meaning. Day blended into night and back again. Once, she thought she felt large, gentle hands lift her, carry her somewhere cooler. Another time, she was certain she heard Maka's voice raised in the same song she'd heard from the drum chamber, though no drum accompanied it now. When clarity finally returned, Sarah found herself on a bed of soft pelts near the cave's rear spring, where the air remained cool even in midday heat. Maka sat nearby, grinding something in a stone mortar. How long? Her voice emerged as a croak. His head snapped up. 3 days. What happened? Desert fever. From a cut, perhaps. Or something you ate. He set aside his work and brought her water. The danger has passed. Sarah sipped slowly, noting the shadows beneath his eyes, the weariness in his posture. You haven't slept. He shrugged, the gesture dismissive. I have watched over sick before. Thank you. The words seemed inadequate for the care he'd shown. Maka returned to his grinding. Rest now. Tomorrow we begin preparing for the western path. So soon. Walsh's men grow bolder. Yesterday they ventured halfway up the main canyon trail. Fear flickered through her. While I was sick, what did you do? What was necessary? The finality in his tone discouraged further questions. As she drifted back to sleep, Sarah realized something had changed between them. The distance Maka had maintained since her arrival had diminished, replaced by something she couldn't yet name but recognized as dangerous because it felt like hope. During her recovery, Sarah began keeping a journal, a small leather-bound book Maka had given her, its pages blank and waiting. At first, she simply recorded the days, marking time as her strength returned. Soon, however, the entries grew longer, filled with observations about canyon life and her enigmatic companion. Day 24 in the canyon. Maka showed me how to make a snare today. His hands are so large that watching him tie the delicate knots seems impossible. Yet he does it with surprising grace. When I finally managed a proper one, something like pride crossed his face. I find myself working harder for that look than I care to admit. As Sarah regained her strength, Maka intensified her preparation for the journey ahead. Each day brought new lessons: how to find water in seemingly dry creek beds, how to navigate by stars, how to move silently across rocky terrain. Day 27. The western path grows more daunting with each description. 3 days without water, Maka says, though there are plants that hold enough moisture to survive if one knows where to look. I asked how many people have successfully traveled this route. Few, was his only answer. Not encouraging. One evening, as they shared a meal of rabbit stew, Sarah broached the question that had been growing in her mind. Why are you helping me? Truly? Maka paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. You needed help. So does half the territory. You don't take in every lost soul. He set down his spoon, considering. Sheriff Mills asked. Before that, when I collapsed at the canyon edge, you could have left me there. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Maka spoke, his voice low. Long ago, I failed to protect those who depended on me. My wife, my son, my people. His dark eyes met hers. Perhaps I grow tired of failing. The admission settled over them like evening shadows, or not quite darkness, but the softening of harsh daylight into something more complex. Day 30. Maka spoke of his wife today, Kimmy. How she laughed often. How she wove the finest baskets in the tribe. How she never feared him even when others did. His voice changed when he spoke of her, softer, younger somehow. I find myself envious of a woman 15 years dead, which makes no sense at all. The preparations continued. Maka fashioned a water skin for her from deer hide, smaller than his but still able to hold enough for a day's careful rationing. He tested her knowledge of edible plants repeatedly, until she could identify each one blindfolded by smell and texture alone. Day 33. Maka took me to a hidden place today, a small cave above our main dwelling where handprints mark the walls. Ancient ones, he said, from the people who came before. He placed his palm against one that matched his size perfectly, as if reaching across time to touch his predecessor. I did the same with a smaller print, a woman's hand from centuries past. The stone felt warm beneath my fingers, though that must have been imagination. As the new moon approached, Sarah found herself writing less about escape plans and more about moments she wished to preserve. The way morning light filtered through the canyon in golden shafts, the sound of Makara's rare laugh when she mimicked a strutting desert quail, the comfortable silence that had replaced awkward tension during their evenings by the fire. Day 35. I dreamed of San Francisco last night, Emma's house by the bay, the life waiting for me there. I should be eager to leave, to put this harsh land behind me. Instead, I woke with tears on my face. What does it mean when safety feels like loss? On the day before they were to begin final preparations for the journey, Sarah sat alone at the cave entrance, writing as the sun set. She didn't hear Maka approach until his shadow fell across her page. What do you write? He asked, curious rather than accusatory. Sarah hesitated, then offered him the journal. Everything. Nothing. Thoughts that need somewhere to go. Maka took the book with careful hands but didn't open it. Words hold power. The missionaries taught me that, if nothing else. Do you wish to read it? No. He returned the journal. Your words are yours alone. But that night, as Sarah added her final entry before sleep, she found herself writing for him as much as for herself, as if someday he might indeed read these pages and understand what she couldn't yet say aloud. Sheriff Mills arrived after nightfall, a dangerous time to navigate the canyon paths. His urgency was evident in his labored breathing and the sweat-darkened band of his hat. They're coming, he said without preamble. Tomorrow at dawn. Walsh has gathered 12 men. Maka's expression remained unchanged, but Sarah saw his shoulders tighten. How did they find us? Diaz. Mills spat the name like a curse. Tracked you from the homestead all the way to the canyon edge. Found your first camp. And the trail up? Maka asked. Not yet, but they will. Mills glanced at Sarah. You need to leave tonight. Both of you. Both. Sarah looked between the men. But Maka's not in danger. It's me they want. Mills withdrew a small leather satchel. Supplies. Not much, but what I could gather without raising suspicion. As Maka inspected the contents, Mills pulled a folded paper from inside his vest. Not another wanted poster, but a faded photograph. He handed it to Sarah. What's this? She asked, studying the image. 2 men stood side by side. One clearly a younger Sheriff Mills, the other a tall Apache man who was not Maka. My past, Mills said simply. And his. The Apache in the photograph wore the uniform of an army scout. His face held a stern dignity, his posture military straight despite the obvious tension of being photographed. Who is he? Nakohi, Mills answered. Maka's father. Sarah's gaze snapped to Maka, who had gone very still. Your father was an army scout? For 3 years, Maka confirmed, his voice carefully neutral. Until they hanged him as a traitor. What? The photograph suddenly felt heavier in her hands. Mills rubbed his weathered face. It was 1868. Nakohi discovered an army commander was selling rifles to hostile bands, then using the resulting attacks to justify slaughtering peaceful Apaches. My father reported this to Mills, Maka continued, who was then a lieutenant. Before they could take their evidence to the territorial governor, the commander accused my father of being the arms dealer. They didn't even give him a proper trial, Mills added bitterly. Just a rope and a horse. Sarah looked again at the photograph, seeing the 2 men with new understanding. And you couldn't stop it? I tried. Mills's voice cracked slightly. Got myself court-martialed in the process. Left the army after that. Became sheriff here 2 years later. What does this have to do with Walsh? Sarah asked. The men exchanged a glance before Mills continued. Walsh was a sergeant under that same commander. He helped fabricate evidence against Nakohi. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. So this isn't just about my land. No, Maka confirmed. Walsh recognized your name when you and Thomas filed your claim. The Winter's name means something in this territory. My father-in-law, Sarah realized. Judge Winters of the Territorial Court, who sentenced Walsh to 5 years hard labor for his part in the conspiracy. Mills finished. Walsh never forgot, or forgave. So Thomas. Sarah couldn't complete the thought. Walsh killed your husband for 2 reasons, Maka said bluntly. Water and revenge. Sarah's mind reeled. Thomas had never mentioned this history. Had he even known? They'd been married only 6 months. Most of that time spent establishing their homestead. And now he comes for me, she said quietly. But why you, Maka? Why must you leave too? Because I helped Mills gather evidence after my father died, Maka explained. Walsh knows this. He has always known I survived, though not where I went. If Diaz has connected you to the canyon, Mills added grimly, Walsh won't miss the chance to eliminate both of you. The 3 fell silent, the weight of shared history settling around them. Finally, Maka spoke. The Western Path is not ready. We need 3 more days to prepare properly. Mills shook his head. You don't have 3 days. You don't even have one. Then we fight, Maka said simply. 12 men, Maka, armed with repeating rifles. I know these canyons. They do not. Sarah listened to them debate tactics, her mind still processing the connections that had brought her to this moment. The past was never truly past. It seemed just waiting beneath the surface like a scorpion, ready to strike. I'll stay and help, Mills declared finally. I'm still sheriff. My presence might give them pause. Or get you killed, Maka countered. Mills gestured to the photograph still in Sarah's hands. I've owed this debt for 30 years. Let me pay some of it now. Maka disappeared into the deepest part of the cave, returning with a bundle wrapped in tanned hide. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing an old but well-maintained Winchester rifle and a revolver similar to Mills's service weapon. You've had these all along? Sarah asked, surprised. Yes. Maka checked the rifle's action, the movement practiced despite what must have been years since he'd last handled the weapon. I thought. Sarah hesitated. The people in town said you were a man of peace. I am. Maka's eyes met hers. When peace is possible. Mills nodded grimly. His father's rifle. Nakohi was the finest shot in the territory. And his son? Sarah asked. Better, Mills answered simply. They spent the next hour planning. Maka knew the canyon like his own heartbeat, every path, every hidden approach, every vulnerable point. He sketched a rough map in the dirt, showing where Walsh's men would likely enter and how they might be diverted or contained. You should hide in the western grotto, Maka told Sarah. It's defensible, with the escape route if needed. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. Both men looked at her in surprise. This fight is as much mine as yours, she continued. More, perhaps. I won't hide while you risk your lives. You have no experience with weapons, Maka objected. Then teach me. Now. Sarah reached for the revolver. I'm a fast learner. Maka hesitated, then handed her the gun, showing her how to check the chambers, how to aim, how to brace for the recoil. His hands guided hers, his voice low and patient as he explained each step. We'll set traps at the 3 main approaches, Mills said, returning to the plan. Anything to slow them down, make them bunch together. I know places where the canyon walls can be collapsed with small charges, Maka added. Not to kill, but to block. Paths, separate their forces. The pragmatic discussion of violence sat strangely with Sarah. These preparations for bloodshed seemed at odds with the gentle healer who had tended her fever, who carved delicate figures from wood, who spoke to his ancestors through an ancient drum. As if sensing her thoughts, Maka paused in his preparations. This is not what I would choose, he said quietly. But sometimes the path chooses us. Mills left to scout the canyon entrance, leaving them alone. In the silence, Sarah found herself studying Maka, the way the firelight played across his face, highlighting the strength and sorrow etched there in equal measure. If we survive this, she began, then stopped, uncertain how to continue. Maka looked up from cleaning the rifle. Yes. Would you come with me? To San Francisco? The question surprised even her. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. My place is here. It doesn't have to be. Not anymore. What place would there be for me in your sister's fine house? Among proper society. No bitterness colored his words, only calm certainty. Some walls cannot be crossed, Sarah. It was the first time he had used her name. The sound of it in his deep voice stirred something in her chest. I'm not asking you to cross walls, she said softly. I'm asking if you'd build something new. With me. The silence that followed seemed to fill the cave, pushing against the stone walls, demanding resolution. But before Maka could answer, Mills returned, his expression grim. Riders approaching from the south, he reported. Moving fast. They'll reach the canyon mouth within the hour. The moment shattered. Maka rose, rifle in hand, all traces of vulnerability gone from his face. It's time, he said. Sarah, take this. He handed her a small leather pouch, his medicine bag. "Keep it with you." "I can't take this," she protested, knowing its significance. "You can. You will." His large hand closed over hers, pressing the pouch into her palm. "For protection." "I thought you had no love," she said, echoing his words from weeks before. Maka's expression softened momentarily. "Perhaps I spoke too soon." Then he was moving, gathering the last of their supplies, his mind already on the battle to come. Sarah tucked the medicine pouch into her dress, close to her heart, and followed him into the uncertain night. They moved through the darkness like shadows, setting their defenses with practiced efficiency. Maka positioned Sarah on a high ledge overlooking the main approach, showing her how to brace the revolver against a rock for stability. 6 shots, he reminded her. "Make each one count." His confidence in her steadied her trembling hands. 2 months ago, she had been a farmer's wife, concerned with garden yields and household duties. Now she lay in wait with a loaded gun, preparing to fight for her life. "If we become separated," Maka continued, "follow this path." He indicated a narrow crevice behind her position. "It leads to a hidden spring. Wait there." A spring. Sarah hadn't known there was another water source in the canyon. Maka nodded. "Few know of it. It feeds underground, emerging only here." He pressed a hand to the rock wall, almost reverently. "The canyon keeps its secrets." The spring was little more than a trickle emerging from the rock face, filling a small, clear pool before disappearing again into the earth. But in this parched land, even such a modest water source was precious beyond measure. "This is why you stay," Sarah realized. "Not just the solitude, the water. One of many reasons." Maka surveyed the surrounding walls. "This place has provided for me, protected me. As you now protect it." His dark eyes met hers. "As we protect each other." The simple statement held a weight that settled in Sarah's chest, warm and certain. Whatever came with the dawn, this moment of connection would remain. Maka returned to Mills at the canyon entrance, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the quiet gurgle of the hidden spring. She touched the medicine pouch at her breast, drawing strength from its presence. From her elevated position, Sarah could see the faint glow of approaching torches in the distance. Walsh's men, moving toward the canyon like a snake of fire in the darkness. Their confidence was evident in their direct approach. No attempt at stealth, no concern for ambush. They believed their numbers gave them power. Sarah thought of Thomas, of his gentle hands and earnest dreams, of his blood soaking into the dry earth of their homestead. Her grief, which had begun to soften in recent weeks, crystallized into something harder, sharper. She checked the revolver one final time. Below, she heard Mako's low whistle, the signal that Mills was in position. 3 defenders against 12 attackers. The odds seemed impossible, yet Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. They had preparation, knowledge, the canyon itself as ally. The first riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon just as false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. 2 men on horseback, rifles resting across their saddles. Behind them, for more on foot, moving cautiously. The remaining 6 would be approaching from another direction, attempting to surround the cave dwelling. Sarah recognized the lead rider even at a distance, Clayton Walsh. Older than she'd expected, his silver hair catching the torchlight, but his posture as straight and uncompromising as his reputation suggested. The man who had ordered her husband's death, who had burned her home, who had pursued her across the territory with the relentless determination of a predator. The sharp crack of Maka's rifle shattered the pre-dawn silence. One of the torches went dark as its bearer dropped it with a cry of pain. Not a killing shot Maka had aimed for the arm, but precise enough to send the men scrambling for cover. Walsh's voice carried clearly in the canyon. "We know you're harboring the Winter's woman, Indian. Send her out and you can live." No response came from Maka's position. Walsh signaled to his men, who began advancing, more cautiously using the canyon walls for cover. They were 20 yards from the first trap when Mills's voice rang out from an unexpected direction. That's far enough, Walsh. I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of Thomas Winters. Confusion rippled through Walsh's men. The presence of the sheriff had not been anticipated. Sarah could see Walsh's head turn sharply, searching for the source of the voice. Mills? Have you lost your mind? Walsh called back. I've got legal papers for the woman's arrest. Your papers aren't worth the ink wasted on them, Mills replied. And I've got witnesses to what really happened at the Winters homestead. It was a bluff. There were no witnesses except Sarah herself. But the momentary uncertainty it created among Walsh's men gave Maka the opening he needed. A controlled rockslide crashed down, cutting off 2 of Walsh's men from the main group. Chaos erupted in the canyon. Walsh's men fired blindly toward Mills's position, their shots echoing off stone walls. Maka moved like a shadow between outcroppings, impossible to track in the dim light. Sarah held her position, watching for the second group that would surely be circling to the eastern approach. Her patience was rewarded when 3 figures appeared below her ledge, moving stealthily toward the cave dwelling. She took a steadying breath, aimed as Maka had taught her, and fired. The shot went wide, but accomplished what she needed. The men scattered, diving for cover, their approach disrupted. One returned fire in her general direction, bullets chipping stone feet from her head. Sarah pressed herself flat against the ledge, heart hammering. She had 5 shots remaining. She would need to make them count. Below, the battle intensified. Mills had created a defensive position behind a boulder, pinning down Walsh and 2 of his men. Maka's rifle spoke occasionally, precise shots that wounded rather than killed, designed to reduce the attacker's effectiveness without crossing into bloodshed that couldn't be undone. A shout from the eastern approach told Sarah that one of Maka's traps had been triggered, a deadfall that wouldn't kill but would certainly injure. She risked a glance over her ledge to see one of Walsh's men limping badly, dragging his partner toward better cover. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Minutes felt like hours as the standoff continued, punctuated by gunfire and shouted threats. Sarah remained vigilant, watching for any attempt to flank their positions. When it came, it wasn't from the direction she expected. A slight scuff of boot on stone behind her was her only warning. She whirled, raising the revolver, to find herself facing a weathered man with cold eyes and an Apache headband. Diaz, the tracker. "Quiet now, Mrs. Winters," he said softly, his own gun aimed steadily at her chest. "We're going for a little walk." Sarah glanced toward the hidden crevice Maka had shown her escape route, now cut off by Diaz's position. "Walsh wants you alive," Diaz continued, gesturing with his gun. "Said nothing about undamaged, though. Your choice how this goes." Sarah's fingers tightened on the revolver. 5 bullets, point-blank range. But Diaz was a professional, his gun unwavering. She wouldn't get a shot off before he fired. "Smart woman," Diaz said, noting her hesitation. "Now toss that gun aside and—" His words cut off as his eyes fixed on something at her throat. The medicine pouch had slipped from inside her dress, hanging visible on its leather cord. "Where did you get that?" His voice had changed, a new edge to it. Sarah said nothing, confused by his reaction. "That pattern," Diaz gestured with his chin. "The beadwork. Where did you get it?" "It was a gift," Sarah said carefully. Something shifted in Diaz's expression of recognition, then what might have been fear. "From the giant. From Shadow Walker." "Yes." Diaz took an involuntary step back, his gun lowering slightly. "Those are death beads. From a curse maker." Sarah remembered Maka's words about his reputation, the superstition that followed his failure as a healer, the belief that his touch brought death. She saw now how she might use that fear. "He gave it to me for protection," she said, her voice stronger. "Against those who would harm me." Diaz's eyes darted between her face and the pouch. Superstition warred with practicality in his expression. The moment's distraction was all Sarah needed. She lunged sideways, simultaneously raising the revolver and firing. The bullet grazed Diaz's shoulder, spinning him back. He fired wildly in return, his shot going high as he stumbled against the rock wall. Sarah fired again, this time hitting his leg. Diaz went down with a cry of pain, his gun skittering across the stone ledge. Sarah kicked it away, keeping her revolver trained on him. "The curse is real," she said coldly. "Tell your men to withdraw." Blood seeped through Diaz's fingers as he clutched his wounded leg. "You don't understand what you're involved in, woman. This isn't just about you or your land. I understand more than you think." Sarah reached into her pocket with her free hand, withdrawing her mother's locket. She opened it to reveal not a portrait, but a small, carefully folded map. "I know what Walsh really wants." Diaz's eyes widened at the sight of the map. "The spring-fed aquifer. You know about it." "My husband died protecting this knowledge," Sarah confirmed. "As will I if necessary." Diaz laughed bitterly. "Noble but foolish. Walsh won't stop. Not for wounds. Not for ghosts. Not for curses." He looked toward the canyon mouth, where gunfire still erupted sporadically. "And neither will his men." "Then they'll die thirsty," Sarah said, tucking the locket away. "Now move." Slowly, dawn broke over the canyon, revealing the scattered positions of Walsh's men. 3 were injured from Makro's traps, 2 more nursing bullet wounds from Mills's steady fire. With Diaz captured and 2 men cut off by the rockslide, Walsh's advantage had dwindled rapidly. Sarah pushed Diaz ahead of her, using the injured tracker as a shield as they moved toward Mills's position. Below, she could see Maka moving from shadow to shadow, setting the final phase of their defense. "Sheriff," she called when they were close enough. "I've got one of them." Mills emerged partially from cover, his eyebrows rising at the sight of Diaz. "Well done, Mrs. Winters." Walsh's voice carried from behind a cluster of boulders. "Diaz? That you they got?" The tracker remained sullenly silent until Sarah pressed the revolver against his wound. "Yes," he hissed through clenched teeth. "The woman shot me." A harsh laugh echoed across the canyon. "A woman got the drop on you? You're losing your touch, Diaz." "She had help," Diaz called back, then lowered his voice for Sarah alone. "The Cursemaker's magic. I felt it." Sarah didn't correct him. "Let them fear Maka. Fear could accomplish what bullets couldn't." "Walsh," Mills shouted. "You're down to 4 effective men. Surrender now and face trial." "Trial?" Walsh emerged partially from cover, his silver hair gleaming in the morning light. "There won't be any trial, Mills. You think the territorial judge will side with you over me? I own half the county." "Not anymore," Mills replied. "I sent telegrams to Santa Fe 2 days ago. Your dealings are being investigated, including your role in Nakohi's death 30 years ago." A flash of uncertainty crossed Walsh's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Mills's voice was steady. "The new territorial governor is very interested in cleaning up corruption. Your name came up repeatedly." Sarah realized Mills was indeed bluffing. There had been no opportunity to send telegrams, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Walsh's men exchanged uneasy glances. "Even if that were true," Walsh said, recovering, "it changes nothing today. I'm taking the Winters woman and the water rights she stole." "I stole nothing," Sarah called out. "The rights were my husband's, legally filed and recorded. Your husband signed those rights over to me before his unfortunate accident," Walsh sneered. "Thomas would never sell our water," Sarah said with absolute certainty. "And we both know his death was no accident." "Prove it," Walsh challenged. "No witnesses, no evidence, just the word of a desperate widow." A shadow detached itself from the canyon wall behind Walsh Maka, moving with impossible silence. Sarah kept her eyes deliberately away from him, focusing on Walsh to avoid giving away Maka's position. "There is evidence," she said, playing for time. "Thomas kept records of every threat you made." This was another bluff, but Walsh's momentary hesitation told Sarah it had hit home. Perhaps Thomas had indeed kept such records, though they would have burned with their home. "Boss," one of Walsh's men called nervously. "Maybe we should pull back. Regroup." "Shut up," Walsh snarled. "No one's leaving until..." Maka struck with the fluid grace of a mountain lion. One moment Walsh was speaking, the next he was disarmed, Maka's massive arm around his throat. "Order your men to drop their weapons," Maka said, his voice carrying across the canyon. Walsh struggled ineffectively against Maka's iron grip. "Do no such thing," he commanded his men. "Shoot him." The remaining gunmen hesitated, unwilling to risk hitting their employer. In that moment of indecision, Mills stepped fully from cover, his rifle trained on the nearest man. "Drop them," Mills ordered. "Now." One by one, the weapons clattered to the ground. The fight seemed to drain from Walsh's men as they raised their hands in surrender. Only Walsh himself remained defiant, his face purpling with rage. "You'll regret this," he spat. "All of you. The only regret here is that it took 30 years to bring you to justice," Mills said, moving forward to secure the prisoners. Maka maintained his hold on Walsh, his expression unreadable. Sarah made her way down from her position, keeping Diaz ahead of her until Mills could take him. "You did well," Maka told her as she approached. "We all did," she replied, the relief of survival beginning to wash over her. A movement caught her eye. One of Walsh's men, supposedly surrendered, reaching for a hidden pistol at his ankle. "Maka!" she cried in warning. Everything happened at once. Maka shoved Walsh aside, turning to face the new threat. Mills swung his rifle toward the armed man. Sarah raised her revolver. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. The gunman fell, hit by both Mills and Sarah. Maka staggered backward, blood blooming on his shoulder, and Walsh, seeing his opportunity, lunged for the edge of the canyon path. No one was prepared for what happened next. The edge of the path, weakened by their earlier rockslide, crumbled beneath Walsh's weight. With a cry of surprise rather than fear, Clayton Walsh plummeted into the canyon depths. Silence fell over the canyon. Walsh's men, seeing their leader vanish over the edge, offered no further resistance as Mills bound their hands. Sarah rushed to Maka, who had sunk to one knee, his hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. "How bad?" she asked, helping him to a seated position against the canyon wall. "I've had worse," he said, though the tightness around his eyes belied his calm words. Sarah tore a strip from her petticoat, pressing it against the wound to slow the bleeding. "We need to get you back to the cave. Your medicines." "Check on Mills first," Maka interrupted. "Make sure the prisoners are secure." She nodded, reluctantly leaving his side. Mills had efficiently disarmed and bound Walsh's remaining men, who sat in dejected silence. "Walsh?" she asked quietly. Mills shook his head. No way he survived that fall. 200 feet at least. One of the prisoners, a grizzled man with a lieutenant's air about him, spoke up. "What happens to us now?" "You'll stand trial for attempted murder at minimum," Mills answered. "Those who cooperate might face lesser charges." The man exchanged glances with his companions. Walsh was the one who wanted the woman. The rest of us were just following orders. "Orders to kill," Sarah said coldly. "Not kill," the man protested. "Capture. Walsh wanted you alive. And my husband? Was he to be captured too?" The man looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Sarah turned back to Mills. "Can you manage them? Maka needs attention." "Go," Mills said. "I'll bring them down the main trail. Meet you at the cave." With Mills's help, Sarah got Maka to his feet. The big man moved with pained deliberation, but remained upright as they made their way back to the dwelling. Inside, Sarah sat him on his sleeping pallet and retrieved his medicine pouch. "Tell me what to do." Maka directed her to various herbs and roots stored in clay jars. She ground them as instructed, mixing them with water to create a poultice for his wound. "You've done this before," he observed as she worked. "Watched my mother tend my father after accidents on the farm." Sarah carefully cleaned the wound, relieved to find the bullet had passed through cleanly. "Not so different from your healing, I imagine." "No," he agreed. "Not so different." As she applied the poultice, Maka's hand covered hers, stilling her movement. You fought well today. I was terrified, she admitted. Fear is a good companion in battle, if you don't let it lead. Sarah secured the bandage around his shoulder. Is it over? Truly over. Walsh is gone, Maka confirmed. His men will face justice. And the water rights? Are yours as they always were. Maka shifted, wincing slightly. Your land can be rebuilt. Sarah sat back on her heels, suddenly exhausted as the tension of battle drained away. I'm not sure I want to rebuild. Not there. Too many ghosts. Maka nodded in understanding. Then your sister's offer. Perhaps. Sarah looked around the cave dwelling that had been her sanctuary these past weeks. Or perhaps there are other possibilities. Before Maka could respond, Mills appeared at the entrance, his expression grim. Walsh? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. Dead, Mills confirmed. Bodies at the bottom of the ravine. I've sent 2 of his men to retrieve it under guard. And the others? Secured. They're talking now, eager to save themselves. Seems Walsh had quite an operation: bribery, extortion, claim jumping. Half the county officials were in his pocket. Sarah absorbed this, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, vindication, and a strange emptiness. Thomas's killer was dead, yet her husband remained gone. Justice had been served, but nothing was truly restored. Maka seemed to sense her thoughts. Endings are rarely clean, he said quietly. Even necessary ones. Mills cleared his throat. There's something else. Something you should see. He led them outside where Diaz stood under guard. The tracker's wounds had been roughly bandaged, but he stood straight, his expression inscrutable. Tell them what you told me, Mills ordered. Diaz's eyes fixed on Maka. Your father did not die a traitor. Maka went completely still. What? I was a boy when it happened, Diaz continued. My father was one of the scouts who served with Nakohi. He witnessed everything but was too afraid to speak. Speak now, Maka said, his voice barely audible. Walsh doctored evidence, created false testimony. Your father discovered he was selling army rifles not just to hostile bands, but to Mexican revolutionaries across the border. Diaz's gaze dropped. My father carried that shame to his grave. Sarah watched emotions cross Maka's face. Disbelief, rage, grief, and finally a profound weariness. 30 years of exile and isolation, based on a lie that had finally surfaced with Walsh's death. Why tell us this now? She asked Diaz. The tracker touched his wounded leg. A debt. For mercy. His eyes moved to the medicine pouch still hanging around Sarah's neck. And perhaps to break a curse.